Today, I would like to tell you about the biggest mistake I made as a language teacher. Many years ago, one of my students was Mr. Tanaka. I have written about his progress in my research papers with his permission. He was a middle-aged Japanese man who began reading starter-level graded readers in English. After reading 2,590 pages in about 6 months, he took the TOEIC test and scored 475. During the following year, he read another 6,456 pages of graded readers. With only 30 hours of story listening and 217 hours of reading at home, his TOEIC score increased by 180 points from 475 to 655. I was amazed. Until then, the greatest TOEIC gains I had seen were about 200 points over 2 years with my junior college students. They had received about 500 hours of mostly skill-based classroom instruction, including less than 30 hours of story listening, plus about 200 hours of reading at home. In contrast, Mr. Tanaka achieved almost the same improvement in just 1 year with only 30 hours of story listening and 217 hours of self-selected reading. By then, I had already been telling stories for about 20 years and using graded readers for about 25 years. I trusted the input hypothesis, which says that comprehensible input causes language acquisition and that input alone is sufficient. I also knew there was research suggesting that output was not necessary for language acquisition. But I had never seen a learner make such rapid progress. Because he had reached a TOEIC score of 655 in just 1 year, I thought he might be ready to move beyond story listening and graded readers. I thought he might benefit from newspapers, movies, and conversations with a native speaker. Mr. Tanaka himself also wanted to improve his speaking ability. So I introduced him to a native speaker teacher. The lessons involved reading English newspaper articles, discussing them in English, watching English movies, and talking about them. At the time, it seemed like excellent advice. It sounded authentic. Authentic materials, authentic conversation, authentic English. He continued those lessons for a year and a half. But after a year and a half, his TOEIC score had not improved at all. That was my mistake. Looking back, I realized that a TOEIC score of 655 was not a sign that a learner was ready to move beyond story listening and graded readers. Some of my most successful learners continued to benefit from them long after reaching much higher levels of proficiency. At that time, I also wondered whether folk tales and fairy tales had become too easy for a middle-aged man. I had not yet begun using Shakespeare or literary short stories. I thought I had reached the limit of what optimal input could do. I was wrong. Over the next 15 years, my students helped me answer that question. They wanted to keep listening to stories, so I gradually moved beyond folk tales and fairy tales. I began telling Shakespeare, retold by Charles and Mary Lamb, and later literary short stories by famous writers from around the world. Then I realized something. One story prepares learners for the next story. One book prepares learners for the next book. As learners understand one story in one book, they become ready for richer stories and richer books. Step by step, story by story, book by book, they continue to acquire language. Later, I saw students reach TOEIC scores of 795, 915, and even 975 through optimal input alone. Mr. Tanaka led me to ask one of the most important questions about language acquisition. How far can optimal input take a learner? My students helped me discover the answer. Much farther than I had ever imagined. Every new level of language competence requires richer input. I thought learners eventually outgrew story listening and guided self-selected reading. I was wrong. They simply need richer and more optimal input. Thank you for watching.